Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul Mascarenhas, and I'm the Assistant Librarian and Academic Resources Manager at CSU Global. And I'm pleased to welcome you to the second installment of the most recent writing seminar that we had just last month, How to Read a Research Article Without Getting Lost in the Details. And today's practice session, fast reading research articles and using the results in your papers. Please note, as I mentioned, this will be recorded and everybody who registered will receive a recording of the event, and it'll also be archived on the Writing Center website, and I'll share that link with all of you later in the chat on how to access this webinar as well as past webinars we've hosted here in the Writing Center. And we have a great session for you here today, and I'm excited to kick off this discussion. But as I want to remind folks, there is a chat button at the bottom in which you can all communicate with each other, let us know where you're attending from, um, any other information you'd like to share with us, which you're excited to learn about today. There's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try to answer as many questions as possible during the Q&A section. And with that, I would like to introduce our speaker. Dr. Erica Jacoby has been teaching at CSU Global since 2020, 2021, and over 10 years at various other universities in the US and Europe. Her topics include academic success and critical thinking, innovation leadership, and power dynamics in organizations. Dr. Jacoby holds a PhD in organizational change and development and an MA in human and organizational behavior. As certified executive coach and business transformation consultant, she is invested in empowering people and organizations to achieve their best possible results in the most direct ways. And with that, I would like to introduce Dr. Jacoby. Thank you so much for providing this for us today.
Thank you so much, Paul, for having me, and thanks everybody for attending. I know there was a hiccup from last week where we had to reschedule because of conflicting interests. Thanks so much for venturing out again and joining us for your lunch break. Thanks again, Paul, for the very warm welcome. And I'd say let's get started with our practice session because we did have a more informative webinar last time in July on the similar topic, and this time we want to practice, 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 practice. So the purpose of the webinar or practice session is to practice fast reading an article and to really integrate your results in the paper that you're writing. So purpose is practice fast reading and to empower you to apply one fast reading technique and to utilize the results for your paper. Along the journey, we want to hone our decision making because there is much more decision making involved than what meets the eye. And so we want to practice together, and potentially we might even be able to open the mics so that we can really be as hands-on as possible. And in between, we also want to discuss the decision making that goes into how to read and what to utilize for your papers. So, quick overview, we're going to review the technique we introduced in July. It's going to be very fast because it is a fast technique for fast reading. Then we do want to go over and fast read an article together. And from there, we want to craft snippets for a specific paper. I will provide an assignment instruction, and so we can craft snippets together and see how they might fit into your paper. Then we're going to recap best practices, and we're going to end with Q&A. So an action-filled hour, and I would say let's get started. And I'm going to start introducing the fast reading technique that we discussed at length last time. So, brief overview. There are 3 steps, but the decisions making starts with deciding how many steps we actually need to take here. The green star stands for maybe that's the only one you do need to take, and that is number 1, read or scan the title of the article, the abstract, and the conclusion. I'll repeat that real quickly. Read or scan the title of the article, the abstract, and the conclusion, because that's going to give you the topic, the methods, and the results. So that's the fastest access to the information you will most likely need, or to decide this is not for me, I'm gonna continue my search in the library. Then if you feel like you need more, you can take the optional step of scanning the introduction, the results, and the discussion. That would be step number 2. And that would give you the detailed concept, more details about how everything took place, the research took place, and definitions. Very often I suggest to my students in the leadership program, work with definitions, because not everybody knows what you're talking about. So if you want to work with definitions and you're looking for more definitions, scan the introduction, the results, and the discussion. Most likely in the introduction, you will find definitions, various definitions. That's also important. Then if you still don't think you have enough information, as a last resort, you can scan the literature review, reference list, and methods. And that will give you further academic resources. Very often our assignments say, please work with minimum 5 to 7 academic resources. Here, that's your step where you can find more resources in the literature review or in the reference list. And if you want to know more about how the entire research was conducted, then you scan the methods. I use the word scan a lot because that's what we're trying to do, right? We're not trying to slavishly understand and every single word and lip read the author's intentions. We want to get to the most usable results fast, and that's what we're going to practice now. So again, read or scan the article, the title, abstract, and conclusion as step number 1. Scan introduction and results, as well as the discussion as a possible step 2, not necessary all the time. And last, for more literature, you can also review the literature review and the reference list. I have a couple of best practices and helpful tips for you as well to avoid lip reading the author's intention and trying to understand every single word. So some helpful tips before we actually get started. The first one would be, remember that we want to practice fast reading, and that is really what the word implies. We want to read as fast as possible. So that means to skim the paragraphs to see what sticks out to you. Then the next helpful tip might be, read the article with the assignment in mind so that you understand, is it for me, is it for this paper or not? What type of info do you need to develop your argument? That is the guiding question for you, right? And not, did I understand everything? And then don't panic if you see unknown words. Just skip them, really, just skip them. It's entirely okay. You do not need to understand every single word to be able to understand an article. So that's the name of the game. And if there are no further questions, I'd like to go to the assignment that I prepared for you. This is not an actual assignment, but it could be one. So it's modeled by an actual assignment, but it's not an active assignment that we have here, because that could give some people an unfair advantage. So let me read it out to you, and maybe you can take a screenshot, bear that in mind as we're reading the article together. The pandemic marked the beginning of the work from home WFH wave. Now that the pandemic has come to an end, companies are often unsure whether to mandate a return to office offer hybrid solutions, or continue the WFH mode, the work from home mode. For this assignment, imagine you are an HR director for an organization that you are familiar with or simply like, and that organization is having issues with staff turnover. Write a 4 to 6 page paper and illustrate the pros and cons of WFH on productivity and employee well-being. Outline the pros and cons based on 5 to 7 peer-reviewed articles and develop at least 2 recommendations for your chief people officer. So that's the assignment, and that's what we want to bear in mind before we start reading the article. Now, because we really want to go into the fast reading mode, I want to stop here for a second and ask Paul, are there any questions in the chat that we can address real quickly before we go to the article, which I selected
So
for
far,
now?
yep, no questions yet, but if anybody feel free to populate any questions in the Q&A section or in the chat. I'm monitoring them if anybody has them, or if you want to speak, we can also allow folks to talk and unmute yourself on the webinar.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I think Angela just raised her hand.
I think she said the chat was disabled. That was on my part. I apologize for that, so that panelists and attendees and everybody can be able to communicate with one another now in the chat.
Fantastic. Very good. So I selected the first article, and then from there we can see whether you might be able to select the next ones. But let's first fast read this. Paul also has the link here, and I want to quickly, so in case you, Paul, maybe you want to share the link in the chat in case
Sure.
you want to have this at home so that you can scroll through in your own time. And I am gonna hold this over. So the name of the game is, this is the first article we're gonna fast read together. And I'd like you to either shout it out or put it in the chat. What do you want me to do? So I am just your instrument. You can just say what you want me to do. I can scroll up or down. I can, but the idea is you tell me what you want to scan and skim first, and then we can continue with further decision making. So shout it out, use it, say it in the chat. What do you want me to do? What do you want to scan first?
And I have unmuted or allowed others to talk. They just need to unmute their microphone. Angela says titles.
Title, very good. Title, and maybe we can do 2 in 1 or so. So what's the first step? What do we want to scan together, read together? Title, and there were 2 other things.
The abstract, Emily said.
Very good. Title, abstract, and one final one for the first step.
Conclusion.
Conclusion,
We had
very
2
good.
conclusions.
Oh, awesome. Very good. Very good. So, just to show you that I can scroll down. So just to show you what that would look like, right? So here's the title, here's the abstract, and then you can skip all of this and look how scary this is, right? So skip the scary stuff and go down to the conclusion. And it will give you a fantastic overview. And I think I went too far. Here's the reference list and so on. So we're going to read that in a little bit. So let's start with the abstract and the title. I'm really going to give you the time now to read this fast. I want to say maybe after 2 minutes, I'm going to time this. After 2 minutes, I'm going to scroll down to the conclusion and give you another 1 to 2 minutes to read that. And you have the link. You can also read it at your own time at home. Um, and then please try to summarize it, and then we'll take it from there. How is that? All right. So you have 2 minutes to read this here, and then I'm going to scroll.
And if nobody was able to open that link, let me know. I shared the link to the website that you can download the papers.
And obviously it would help to take notes, right? And by the way, as one best practice as well, while you're taking notes, always make sure that you have your in-text and end-text references ready as well, because if you want to use it, you don't want to be looking at this information up later, because you will most likely not find the article any longer. All right, maybe this will do for this short abstract. Let me go down to the conclusion. Danger territory here with all these data and graphs. I don't want to miss it. Here we go. All right, this is longer, so I'm going to give you more time here. And at some point, I'm also going to scroll further down because there's another paragraph. So I'll give you another 1.5 minutes to read this, and then I'm going to scroll down to the last paragraph. I'm going to scroll down a little bit. And one more time.
Also important to note that you want to make sure you can read your handwriting in the notes that you take. That's very important.
Guilty. I can never, never, never read my handwriting. Or you put it in the computer right away, right? That's
Yes,
what I do. Then you get
exactly.
rid of it. But really make sure that you reference it already. I can tell you what takes a minute now will take you 20 minutes later once you're going through all the articles you opened and you can't find this information any longer. I've been there, done that many, many times. You don't need to repeat my mistakes. Awesome. So I would say, I'm gonna pull this away one more time. Um, and number one, questions. What I would like to do next is really see what were you able. I mean, this was a very, very brief uh, opportunity to fast read this, right? So what did you already gather? Which information did you get out of this? So maybe we can either shout this out or put it in the chat. Um, However you want to handle it. And I'm trying to capture this here. What would your summary be of what you've just read?
And I have
Mhm,
some text for you from Carol.
mhm.
She mentions in a work from home environment that increase in hours worked, fewer sick days, and better economic performance for company. She also mentions a decrease in productivity.
Company.
And I'll have to
Uh,
say those are great notes because they align perfectly with, I mean,
Absolutely.
what was writing down and pulled from that. Yeah, it's supposed to be a bulleted list, she says, and I know sometimes I don't think that the formatting transfers very well into the chat. Um, she also,
And
mentioned.
don't worry at all, because I'm just, Paul is reading it. I am just putting the notes down. So decrease in what? I'm sorry.
In productivity.
In productivity. So we also talked about decision making, right? I didn't even prepare for this, but when I see the word productivity, I have an action item here almost. Can anybody guess what my action item advice would be when I hear the word productivity? What might I need as someone who grades a paper later? Do we all know what productivity means?
Carol says data.
Data, right? So we want to have data here. And any other takers? Anything else?
Definition.
Yes, data and the definition, right? Um, or at least a way of understanding when we're talking about productivity, what are we talking about? Because I can already read this through this abstract and through the conclusion that productivity can be seen as an output from a worker. It can be seen as I worked 20 hours, but was that productive, right? So how do we measure productivity? That might be an interesting one as well. Okay, do we have other thoughts
Yes.
on how to summarize this? More information, maybe even?
Yes.
Mhm.
To continue with Carol's synopsis, she also includes more meetings, was what she was pulling from the article, less time in direct interactions with supervisors,
Perfect.
Less coaching, less networking.
Less coaching, less networking.
And
Oopsie, uh, networking. But I'm gonna put this all in one maybe because it's one thought, right? So, and in my eyes, it is exactly how you can measure productivity, right?
mhm.
So,
and
um,
and then maybe she also mentions kind of in a separate section of influencing factors includes individual characteristics, um,
individual characteristics. Uh-huh.
children in the home,
Children in the home. Mhm.
and commute time for work from home.
Perfect.
Uh,
Very good. Anything else?
Yes, Ambrose says the work from home is a new phenomenon, and the article highlights some of the benefits and drawbacks of experimenting with the studies.
Oh, know how
Sorry.
to write. Not even- that often goes wrong the first time. So the work from home is a new phenomenon.
Yep.
Uh,
And the
and
the
just one second.
article, oh, go ahead.
Mhm. And the article,
Highlights some of the benefits and drawbacks
perfect.
of
Very good.
experimenting with the studies. And they also mentioned less human interactions.
Yes. So I'm gonna put this, already trying to organize this a little bit.
Right, putting all these kind of the similar pieces that were drawn out of that brief synopsis, reading the abstract and the conclusion.
Yeah. So what was, I'm sorry, I forgot what the student said. Fewer, what was it,
Less human interactions.
less networking and
Hmm.
human interaction. It's very good. And I would like to know also from the title, maybe, um, studies usually have a certain target group. What was the target group here? Do we know who this study was conducted on? What was the target group? Who were the participants, maybe?
Carol says IT professionals.
Yes. Highlight some of the benefits and drawbacks and um, the study focuses on the more detail, the better. How many? The target group of a or the participant group is usually limited. So do we know how many? I think it
Yes,
may. Yes. Okay.
10,000, as Carol mentioned. She also mentioned, and this may be getting into like more of the developing of the process, that they didn't understand what was meant by commute time to work from home environment in the paper.
Okay, so we have a question, right? What is meant by the commute time in the WFH environment? Can any, this is what I call collective intelligence. So did anybody understand that? Where did that come up? And what does it mean here? Why are we bringing the commute time in? Any conclusions here? And maybe anybody else can help? So this is the time to either go back to the article, to the abstract, the title, or to really maybe skip it, or guess, right? My guess would be that we're bringing the commute time in here because it is likely time saved, right? The difference between work from home and going back to the office is work from home, you do not have a commute time, but if you go back to the office, you do have a commute time. And that cuts into your productivity, right? If productivity means hours worked and your potential output, then your commute time going back and forth between the office and your home, that might drastically cut into your productivity numbers, right? So, all right. So I want to maybe go to the, I'm amazed, right? So I don't know how you feel, but I'm amazed how much we were able to retrieve from an invested time investment of, I think it was 5 minutes, right? A
Mhm.
time investment of 5 minutes. And this is going out to everybody who says it's taking so long to read an article, right? It's so strenuous to read an article. In theory, I agree. In practice, I would say skip the scary stuff. Skip all the numbers and so on, because you see how concrete this is. And that's also something we did last time. If you compare this to the output, and I mean, we could go deeper and deeper and deeper, right? So I just want to show you, not that it matters, but I had prepared something at home. So here, this is the abstract of the summary. I just want to show you how much is in there already, right? So we don't need to compare this. I like yours better because it's yours. I just want to show you there is so much information in there, and your professor will be delighted when you put that kind of information in an article and reference it, right? Reference it in brackets, in-text citation, in-text reference, and in-text reference, of course, as well in your reference list. So, and maybe it's okay to sort of share as a professor what I personally don't like. And I'm sure my colleagues will join me in saying when a student writes, work from home is always more productive. No reference, no explanation, or Forbes. Forbes 2018, whoever wrote it, and if I were the person who had written it, I would still not want you to use it because it's not detailed enough. Critical thinking means we're looking at a phenomenon from various perspectives, and then we're trying to go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, because if you have to make a suggestion to your chief people officer, you want to have some details, right? So this is already pretty good. It's just one resource. It's just 5 minutes, and you have a lot of details already, right? So I just wanted to show you that. And I wanted to ask a couple of questions now. And that is number one, I can't read it if I have to start the slideshow from current slide. And I can still not read it, so let me look here. Do you feel you also, so I want to ask you your feelings really. Do you feel you have already garnered enough um, usable information from this article? Um, Maybe can you give me some feedback here? Do you feel like you've got usable information that you can use or not? And my next question would be, would you go over steps 2 and 3? And we're going to get to the third question later, but I would first like to discuss our decision making. After this information, do you feel it's enough for now? And I will also give you my answer. And or would you go to steps 2 and 3?
I do have a
Mm,
couple of comments. Ambrose says, and it's as interesting identifying something that wasn't said in the article. And they mentioned one thing not mentioned is the benefit of not commuting to work, and is the reduction of CO2 emissions. So something else that might be like for further study, for something else that you might make you think of, like maybe I want to incorporate some other research that answers that question that has been brought up by this.
Absolutely. And I would take notes right away. I wanted to write this down. I just can't when I'm sharing. But this is absolutely, this gives you so much information that you already know because you have to say pros and cons and you have to make a recommendation, right? So it already makes you think and go like, huh, what could a con be, right? What could that be? And then you can look in a very targeted way which other resources you want to bring in or which topics you at least want to address, right? That's what we call critical thinking. Excellent. Thrilled here.
And
Any others?
and Carol says that they would likely move on to the next article as far
Very
as
good.
right.
Yeah. How many people, quick show of hands, how many people would move on to the next article?
Yep, there goes some hands.
Yes. And just can we quickly discuss why? So that we know that we wanted to hone our decision making along the way. To do that, we need to know why. Why do we think it's enough and it's time to go to the next article rather than doing steps 2 and 3? What do you think? And not the next article, I meant the next steps, I'm sorry. So why would you say it's enough? I agree, absolutely, by the way. But why would you say it's enough? When do you know it's enough to go on to the next um, article instead of going to the next steps? Any ideas?
Nothing yet. Um, Carol says, I'm only going to attribute a small amount of information to any given source.
Yes. At the end of the day, you only have, I forgot how many pages, 4 to 6, right? You need a conceptual introduction. What is work from home? How can we measure pros and cons, productivity, and so on? So that is a happy page, right? You also need an introduction. This paper will talk about XYZ, and we have 3 steps doing that. So that's your introduction. Then you need a conceptual introduction saying, work from home is the new phenomenon that, and we need to decide this is the situation. And then we need to offer pros and cons, right? So we're not going to talk 1.5 hours about this one article because the essence of critical thinking is to see different sides to the same of the same story, right? So very good. You're not gonna spend that much time there, so we can actually move on. I want to quickly, I feel like we've already done this, but I want to talk about the paper integration because before we move on to the next article, I would like to know where in the paper, if I go back, we have fantastic results here. This is what you collected, and I can also add the other con of CO2 emissions and so on. But where in the paper would you really talk about this? And what and how I think we've already discovered quite a bit.
And go ahead and,
Where
yeah, enter it in the chat or unmute yourself. Carol says they're not sure they understand the question, and I'm assuming you're asking where at of part of the paper, whether introduction, the body,
exactly.
where are you going to input this
So
information?
you want to plan your paper, right? Because you don't want to spend too much time with the introduction. You don't want to spend too much time with the conclusion. You don't want to stress one article. So that's why I'm wondering how and where would you put this into an article, into a paper, I'm sorry, into your own assignment.
And Ambrose says we've identified the what, where, how, and when questions referred to in the article to analyze our paper.
Mhm. Mhm.
And Carol says they would incorporate the insight from the articles within the body.
Yes, I would agree, right? So the body where it says pros and cons, list pros and cons, that's part of the assignment, and then make a recommendation. In the recommendation, you can obviously summarize it and bring that in a high level view, but you want to talk about the different perspectives in the body and the pros and cons part. Very good. So I feel we've already collected this very well. I just wanted to quickly give you my version, what I wrote here. There are pros and cons regarding work from home or remote work approaches. To decide on the right approach for XYZ case company, examining the impact of work from home on productivity as well as employee well-being is pivotal, right? And then I go, so that's my little introduction. And then I say, based on the study of over 10,000 IT professionals, Gibbs et al., here comes your in-text reference, and there is a little mistake in there, 1 comma too many before the brackets. Sorry, I'm going to correct that. Contend that productivity declined by 8 to 19% during the COVID-19 work from home, primarily due to increased communication costs and reduced interaction with peers and supervisors. They argue that firms must implement better tools, training, and policies to enhance virtual communication and collaboration to counter these productivity challenges. That's how I would very fast first draft, how I would integrate it or how I tried to integrate that, right? But I feel you've already done a lot of this with what we collected here. So let's move on to the next one. I wanted to ask you, before you head to the next article, how would you decide which article to choose? Where would you look for another article?
So far, nobody's answering. I know if I'm searching in the library, Carol says ProQuest in the CSU Global Library.
Mhm.
And Ambrose, would you care to speak? They rose their hand.
So ProQuest is one option, the library.
Yeah,
Yes,
sometimes oh, go ahead.
yes, yes. I'll look at the references as well.
Yes, that's what
Thank
I
you.
was, because sometimes, I have so many students that say I get lost in the library, and it's easy to do, right? So you can also quickly scan the literature review or the reference list. Thank you so much. And I've done the work for you. And but just letting you know how I go over this, right? So I chose the next article, Bellman and Hübler, 2020, job satisfaction and work-life balance, differences between homework and work at the workplace of the company. I chose that uh, for the simple reason that I'm scanning the title and I'm scanning the other titles. And depending on what I want, for example, productivity dynamics up here, the first one, productivity dynamics, performance feedback, and group incentives. If I wanted to weave in more about what productivity means, I might choose this. If I want to directly go to what I think is going to be more of a, if we have a pro now, then this might be the con. I want to have the opposite. I want to have the opposite perspective, and then I might choose this, right? So I would say before you go to the next article, I would most certainly look for A, how do I reference this? I would immediately take notes, just as we've done this here. Write down the in-text reference and the in-text reference so that we know that, and look for further literature. Then you can either go to Bellman and Hübler or any of the others, you know, the reference list usually goes on and on and on. And, you know, repeat from scratch the process that we talked about, or you can even go to the literature review and see where this article is mentioned and see what they say about this article. All right, here it is, and let me just quickly check the time. I'm wondering whether we do have the time to go over a whole nother article. But just letting you know, here is job satisfaction and work-life balance, differences between work from home and work at the workplace of a company, right? So here we have the direct comparison. And because I fear we might not have enough time to do this, here we have the exact opposite contention. And then because if we go through the whole process, if we had time, we would go through the process again. We would invest another 5 minutes. We would summarize it. And then we would have these points here, and then you can add to your paper, right? So this is what I would add here, the yellow highlights from the second articles. It's not so important what I would actually highlight or what I would actually add. What I want you to take away from the session is we invested 5 minutes to fast read the first article. And then we summarized it in another 5 minutes. And then we were already able to say, this is the snippet that goes into the body of our paper as one perspective. Then we should write it down, put in, again, there is one comma too many here, gotta correct that. We should write a quick draft down, and then we can add to it with the next 5 minutes invested in fast reading another article. And then we have 2 different perspectives already. Then we have pros and cons, right? And then after that, you can decide, that's a matter of taste actually, and style, whether you want to sort of go, I have one argument pro, so I'm going to do one argument con, or whether I want to do pro, con, con, and then summary, and then make your suggestions. All right, I want to get to the Q&A. So I want to share best practices as a summary of what we've discussed so far, so that you can practice it more at home. So, summary of best practices: select promising articles by the title. Scan the article for usable information for your assignment, not to fully understand everything. Don't read everything. Often step 1 will suffice. Always immediately paraphrase your results. Immediately put your results in your paper after every article, right? And the nice thing is that then you see, wow, you know, in APA double spaced, I already have a page here, right? And it didn't take me that long. And immediately put it into your paper. And then on the second page, make sure to write down the proper in-text and in-text references. Do not copy, do not copy and paste passages from the article. It's not going to help you with your plagiarism report. So just don't. Use your intellectual capacity and summarize it in your own words. Do not use AI to paraphrase. Do not use AI to paraphrase. Find further articles with different perspectives to improve your critical thinking score. That's it. And I would like to, whether we want to open the mics or whether we want to continue with the chat, but I would like to get to the Q&A or thoughts maybe. to see how we can refine the process.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you, Dr. Jacoby. I really appreciate it. I know Carol has an idea of how they keep track of their information and has a question. And she mentions I keep a table called Resource Tracker for each of my classes. The headings for my columns are topic, source, and content. I cut and paste some of the most poignant parts of the papers I'm reviewing. This process allows me to refer back to an entire course worth of papers when it comes to my final assignment. Do you have any suggestions or for other ways to keep track of research content?
And this is awesome.
I
Thank
love
you.
it. I know.
I bow. I'm bowing. That's just wonderful. Kudos, hats off. Do I have other recommendations? I want to highlight one aspect you mentioned briefly at the end. What you said that you're developing your final portfolio review from week 1. That is my recommendation. I'm always amazed how many students call or write and say, Dr. Jacoby, it is week 7.5 or 8, and I need more time for my final portfolio. That is something you should work on week after week after week. And I think that's a fantastic way. A final portfolio is really not rocket science. It's the summary of the entire course, and you can show everything you've learned. You can showcase how much you're capable of using the materials and the thought processes that you came across during this course. So to have a summary, and the way you pointed that out with the table and the references, that's just fantastic. And I'm sure you mentioned also put a topic next to it, right? So that you later on can see, I'm going to use this for this topic in the final portfolio review. And maybe you also want to, as you're going through this, and if you're as you're putting this together, maybe you already want to have a look at the final portfolio review in some new courses. It's called signature assignment, by the way, and sort of say, I might be able to use this passage here or these references for this part of the assignment, right? So that we know, okay, where am I going to use it already? And maybe you want to add that column to your table, but it's an excellent, excellent, excellent idea. I wish I could copy that and put it in an announcement. Wonderful idea. Any other questions, ideas as to best practices as to how to go about this? Or also, I don't want to hide that, right? That there might be still some hiccups, some fears, some things that didn't go down that well, right? We're making it sound very easy right now because it was relatively easy, but we're also together. So were there any concerns, any fears, anything where you go like, I'm not sure about this?
Ambrose says that they summarize each discussion, write weekly critical thinking papers with references, and create a database for my final portfolio project.
Wonderful.
So
That's,
similarly, collect it along the way as you're going through each module.
yes, very good. And as you were reading the articles, or this article, uh, did you have any inhibitions or any, oh, this might be difficult, any concerns? Was anything not as clear as, or not as easy as we're trying to make it look now? Because I do really want you to use scholarly resources because you get so much more information out of them. And it's really a much better approach than using blog articles, Forbes, other non-peer reviewed articles. In a way, an article like this does a lot of work for you. Were there any concerns? I don't want to hide the concerns.
Just a real quick note about the table and how Carol collects the information throughout the modules. They'd be happy to share a screenshot if you think it would be helpful. I don't know if they can post an image in the chat though, but if you would be interested in
Oh,
in,
absolutely.
in seeing
Absolutely. I
that.
think that would be perfect.
And
Perfect.
and they can write to you directly or send it to the writing center. I could share that with you either way.
Either
Um,
way, yeah.
uh,
So that's fantastic, and maybe we can send it out, Paul, with the link, or
mhm.
if she feels comfortable with that. That's wonderful. That's really wonderful.
And Ambrose says that no, I try to skip difficult words and do further research on them to enhance my understanding.
Very good. Yeah. And Amber, sometimes you will even find out that they sound scary and we can research them more, but sometimes it also helps to simply skip them and we will still understand the bigger context. And that's another thought I also have for saving the information for later, right? We do want to stay with, we don't want to mention every single article. We want to mention the aspect. We want to mention the aspects that are there to impress, right? So we want to mention some details that help my point, but we also don't want to be all too linear. So we also want to have opposing perspectives or other perspectives, more diverse perspectives. But for that, we also need to keep it concise, right? That's important.
Yeah, I felt like I was taking too many notes as I was reading it. You know, I was thinking, is this too much information? Am I just completely ignoring my own voice? And what am I getting out of it? And sometimes I feel like a trick is to practice synthesizing the information as I'm reading it and not write word for word what the article says. I'm putting it more in my words and trying to paraphrase immediately as right out of the gate. And I think also something you brought up was a great practice is the so what question when you had mentioned about productivity is a great way to think about your own writing when you're writing something and you just make a blanket statement and then you continue on writing without really sharing what what do you mean by productivity? What do you mean by that statement? There's still so much left to say about a particular sentence or a statement that you make in your papers. So always asking, so
Exactly.
what?
And I would also really say, maybe in the table, I haven't seen the table, but I'm curious really. Maybe in the table you can also have, or another table for concepts, because I always say you need a conceptual introduction, right? If we're just talking work from home, and you say, it's simply more convenient for me, or if it's convenient for me, it must be convenient for everybody, right? There is a lot of pros and cons to it. But for that, we also need to understand what is productivity, how do we measure it? Because is it really only how many hours did we work? That might not have anything to do with productivity. So to fathom a certain concept, we often need another concept that's linked to it. And that in this case could be well-being, right? Because you can also happily burn your employees out. And if you think that that's productivity, then wait till you get to well-being, and then you will be surprised where your money goes as an employer, because if people call in sick, because if people are burned out, they're not that productive, right? So it's usually already in the conceptual overview. You want to present which sides, um, which facets one topic can have. And from there, you can go into the pros and cons so that you can get to your application to this and this case company and making the recommendations as it was requested in the assignment to your chief people officer, right? But maybe we can even add to that table, like here's the concept and here is the balancing concept that we need to discuss and for it to even only make sense.
Well, I thank you so much, Dr. Jacoby, and thank you everybody for attending. It is a little bit after 1. I know we could definitely go on all afternoon, I'm sure, and sharing best practices and tips. And this is a great topic to continue discussing as folks, get into their individual modules as well as into their portfolio project. I can see this really branching out into other areas in the writing process. Um, Ambrose says thank you. They'll listen to the recording through the CSU Global and refer to it again. Thank you for mentioning that. It is being recorded. I shared the link with you in the chat where it'll be archived on the Writing Center website. And so you'd have access to not only this one, but other past recordings. And already you can watch the last recording that Dr. Jacoby did about the fast reading and kind of the initial um, webinar that started this conversation. You could review that as well. Any last words, Dr. Jacoby, before we sign off and end the webinar?
I'm just very thankful for the great participation and for the interest in the topic. It was a pleasure being here. Thank you, everybody, and see you in the next one.
All right, that's awesome. Thank you all so much. Have a great rest of your day.